Being 2 p.m, we'll move to question time, and I call Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. The following are some of the reactions from economists to the government's latest budget. Quote, "This is the most irresponsible budget in recent memory. The government set itself a simple standard, not to make the Reserve Bank's job harder. Michelle Bullock may just choke on her cornflakes." HSBC's chief economist, Paul Bloxham, said, quote, "Indeed, core inflation is likely to be higher in a world with the subsidies than one without. There is a growing risk that rates remain higher for even longer." And Chris Richardson said, "My big ask of the budget was that it didn't poke the inflationary bear. I don't think it passed that test." Minister, given the reactions of independent economists, aren't the Reserve Bank's inflation assessments far more credible than the Albanese Labor government's?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I welcome the question from Senator Birmingham and the opportunity to talk about the fantastic budget that the Albanese Labor government delivered last night. And I note in the question there was reference to the subsidies, the energy subsidies that were included in the budget as a way of putting downward pressure on inflation that I thought I heard in the media reports that you were all supporting. I think that's what I heard. Or are you now saying that you don't think that is a way to put downward pressure on inflation and help people with the cost of living? This budget that we delivered last night has a focus on easing some pressure on people around the country, so that goes to the cost of living relief. It looks at how we can repair the budget over time from the one that we inherited from those opposite. I know it must kill you. It must absolutely kill you to know that we've delivered the second surplus, or we're going to deliver the second surplus, the first government in 16 years to actually achieve it, that we've got lower debt than we inherited, lower deficits that we inherited, that we're paying less interest on that debt, and that we've managed to find savings, something that seemed to elude those opposite in their budgets, that we've been able to find savings, pay down debt, lower interest, smaller deficits and two surpluses at the same time. And whilst we're doing all that, we've got an eye on the future. That is, what role should Australia play in the global economic transformation that we're seeing at the moment? And what do we hear? That those opposite are going to vote against a future made in Australia. I mean, why would you think that was okay? Against Australian jobs, against Australian industries, against a tax system that works to incentivise the production, to play a real role in the economic transition to net zero. What a surprise. Those that can't stop saying no, say no to even a future made in Australia.
Senator Birmingham's first supplementary.
Thanks, President. The budget papers confirm the unprecedented increase in net overseas migration under the Albanese government, with 1.67 million new migrants coming to Australia over 5 years. At the same time, Labor's budget shows there will be zero growth in housing construction next year after 2 years of falls. Will you admit the Albanese government's bad decisions over 3 budgets have actually added to pressures in the housing market?
Order. Order. Order across the chamber. Order. Senator, Minister, I have not called you. Minister, I have not called you. I'm waiting for order. I'm waiting for order across the chamber. Senator Cash, that does include you when I call senators to order. Order. Senator Wong. Minister Gallagher.
Apologies, President. I was too quick out of the seat. But how audacious, I might start where I was interrupted, that Senator Birmingham, who was a senior member of the former government that did nothing in the area of social or affordable housing or working with the states and territories on increasing housing supply, would wander in here and try and absolve themselves from any responsibility for the fact that we don't have enough houses in this country. The Commonwealth Government, when they were in power, removed themselves from any involvement outside of trying to ransack your super to pay for housing, to actually deal with the fundamental issues of low and affordable housing supply in this country. There is no government, other than the Albanese Labor government, that has lent in more heavily in this space to increase supply and deal with the housing challenges that exist across the economy.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, both you and the Treasurer have tried to claim an emphasis on spending restraint. Yet how is this the case when, compared with the last budget update in MyEFO, tax receipts have gone up again in each of the forward years, but so have deficits forecast compared with MyEFO? Isn't it clear that you are spending faster than even your record revenue intake is growing?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And again, I think the Treasurer and I have been extremely honest about the pressures that are intensifying on the budget in those 5 key areas: NDIS, defence, health, aged care, and paying the interest bill on the $1 trillion of Liberal debt that we inherited when we came to government, which I might say this budget shows that we are paying $80 billion less interest costs on that debt because of the work we've put in to lowering the requirements for debt to fund the budget. And the second point I'd make is the fact that over the last 2 budgets, continued in this, we are cleaning up the mess of a former government that never budgeted in an honest and complete picture. So we have terminating measures. What about MyGov? Do you think MyGov is a program that only operates for 1 year or 2 years? Oh, well, that's how it was budgeted for. We are now providing that funding. 2/3 of the net spend in this budget is unavoidable spending, most of which we inherited from those opposite.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, President. And my question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. In the Treasurer's budget speech last night, it was clear that the number one priority of the government and the budget is helping Australians with the cost of living, while also laying the foundations for future prosperity with a future made in Australia. Can the minister update the Senate on how the budget delivers for every Australian?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator O'Neill for that question and for the focus on the budget, and indeed on behalf of the constituency she represents in the beautiful state of New South Wales. The budget that the Treasurer handed down last night does deliver for every Australian, as Senator O'Neill pointed out in her question, from a government that is working for all Australians. A tax cut for every Australian taxpayer from the 1st of July 2024 and a further package of cost of living relief, including $300 energy bill relief for every household and a little bit more than that, $325 for eligible small businesses. The budget will see us invest in more homes in every state and territory across Australia. It will provide more support for parents and wages growth in every industry, and we saw again good wages WPI numbers released today, showing that wages continue to grow under this government. Investments in TAFE and universities, investments in women's equality, in women's safety and in opportunities for women, energy and industry policy to invest in a future made in Australia, creating jobs across the country, stronger Medicare and commitments to strengthen the care economy, another area where we saw underinvestment and undervalue placed by the former government, strengthening our defence capability and in support for small business. This budget has so much in it in terms of the challenges we're dealing with, but all the opportunities that we see ahead. It's a very different budget to the budgets that we've seen from coalition governments, including that famous Prime Minister Abbott slash-and-burn budget that the Liberals handed down 10 years ago. We're not here to cut health and education that we saw under the Liberals. Our plan is about maximising the economic and industrial benefits of the move to net zero, something that those opposite don't even believe in, and securing Australia's place in a globally changing economic and—
The time has expired. Senator O'Neill, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Minister, and I know that there isn't enough time in these answers for you to tell us all the amazing things that are in the budget, but it is indeed great to hear that the budget will provide further cost of living relief while also laying the foundations for future prosperity. Can the minister provide further detail about how this budget is underpinned by responsible economic management and why this is in the interest of all Australians?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator O'Neill for giving me the opportunity to talk about our responsible approach to budget and economic management. This budget strikes the right balance between keeping pressure off inflation and delivering cost of living relief at the same time, whilst keeping an eye on the future and the future growth opportunities, and at the same time strengthening public finances. The improvements in the budget that have occurred since we took office is a result of our decision-making and our focus on being fiscally responsible. After delivering the first surplus in 15 years, we're projecting the first back-to-back surpluses in nearly 2 decades. We're expecting a stronger fiscal outcome in every year compared to when we came to government, saving around $80 billion in interest costs over the decade. We've found $77 billion in savings and reprioritisation since coming to government. We're banking 96% of the revenue upgrades this year, keeping pressure off inflation while it's above band, and we're doing this while we're spending on unavoidable.
Senator O'Neill, second supplementary.
Thank you very much, Minister. With the nation's books in good shape, Minister, can you please outline how last night's budget will directly reduce inflation and build on the government's existing policies, which are easing cost of living pressures for Australians?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. This government's budget is an inflation-fighting and future-making budget that strikes the right balance, one that is fit for the times. It's putting downward pressure on inflation, not upward pressure. The targeted cost of living measures announced in the budget are expected to reduce inflation, with energy bill relief and Commonwealth rent assistance expected to directly reduce inflation by 0.5 percentage point in 24-25. This is on top of the government's existing inflation-fighting investments, policies opposed by those opposite, the existing energy bill price relief, the cheaper childcare, the boost to Commonwealth rent assistance are expected to take 0.75% off inflation in the 23-24 fiscal year. Treasury is now forecasting that we could now see headline inflation return to the target band by the end of 2024, slightly earlier than was expected at MyEFO.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. In these uncertain economic times, Australians needed a budget that restored their standard of living, that restored prosperity and created opportunity, and restored budget discipline and honesty. Instead, Australians got a budget that will leave interest rates higher for longer, costing mortgage holders and renters thousands of dollars. Labor came to government promising that Australians would be better off. They said you would feel a change of government in your pocket. But isn't it true that after 2 years and 3 Labor budgets, real wages have gone backwards by 7.5% and the average Australian household with a mortgage is $35,000 worse off?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, what the Australian people have got with the election of an Albanese Labor government is a government that's directly focused on cost of living pressures for them, but also is dealing with the challenges that were ignored by those opposite for a decade. So we're dealing with issues like housing, we're dealing with energy policy, we're dealing with the net zero transformation, and at the same time we're doing all of that, something that those opposite couldn't even reach agreement with themselves, let alone lead a policy discussion across the country. While we're doing all of that, we're investing in the care economy, we're investing in universities and future of skills, we're investing in women. Remember that little problem? Remember that problem where women felt completely abandoned by the former government? We're dealing with issues like that. So when you talk about all the spending that we shouldn't be doing, is it the investment in women's safety that we shouldn't be doing? The leaving violence payment that you only funded for 2 years, is it that we shouldn't be funding? Should we not be putting super on PPL? Is that an area that you wouldn't prioritise? We are building in substantial support for people not only so that the system's in their pockets, but that it sends a message about the value, in this case, of women and their women's economic security and the drive for equality across the economy. So we are doing a lot of things. We're addressing long-term challenges, we're dealing with short-term cost of living pressures, and we're laying down the foundations for future growth. And that is what the Australian people expect their government to do. It will pay benefits, the wages that we've got moving for the first time, again in a decade. Good results today showing that wages are moving and we are seeing real wages growth. Again, that is important in terms of the support people get around the household, but we recognise there's more to be done. That's why we changed the tax cuts that you voted for, and that's why we're bringing forward energy bill relief in this budget to everyone as well.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. After the budget, independent economist Chris Richardson said, "My big ask of the budget was that it didn't poke the inflationary bear. I don't think it passed that test. The government said it would be careful not to front-load its new costs, but that's exactly what it did, and its new dollars are both big and fast." Why is this government spending an additional $315 billion instead of reining in spending to actually address its homegrown inflation and deliver real cost of living relief to ordinary Australians?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And look, I just want to take up Senator Hume on her using a new figure, I think, which is now over $300 billion. So in that, Senator Hume, are you no longer going to index the age pension? Is that what you're not going to do? You're not going to index job seeker? You're not going to pay veterans the compensation they need? The compensation that veterans need, is that
Minister,
right?
please
well, that's
resume
the
your
number
seat.
you're using. If you
Minister, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Senator Hume, you've asked your question. Senator Hume, don't speak back to me. You're not in a debate with me. I am trying to establish order in this Senate, and I'm asking you to refrain from disorderly interjections. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. And all I can take from the question I was asked that raises the figure that Senator Hume used is that the opposition have now decided that indexing the aged pension or providing support to veterans is wasteful spending, because that is the argument they are putting. In addition to that, I can list through a range of services that were not funded properly, underinvested in or not funded at all in an ongoing way, including palliative care services, including chronic health care services, and we are fixing all of that up in this budget.
Thank you, Minister. Time has expired. Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Madam President, Australians needed a budget that restored discipline and spending restraint. It needed a government that restored the fiscal guardrails. But instead, this government refuses to show economic leadership and take the hard decisions to reduce spending and get inflation under control. Minister, can you confirm that for every dollar of savings you have spent 4?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Gallagher. Well, thank you, and I thank Senator Hume for the question. And I can confirm that every dollar of savings, $77 billion since we came to government, is $77 billion more than the opposition ever saved. And certainly in their last budget had zero savings. So it's $77 billion more than you ever put forward. In terms of fiscal responsibility, we have showed spending restraint. Real spending growth is in the order of 1.4%, which is half of what was under the former government. We've got gross debt below, like hundreds of billions of dollars below what was forecast when we came to government. We're paying less on our interest bill because of that. We have reduced the deficits that we inherited, and we have and are on track to deliver 2 surpluses. And if it's all so easy, why wasn't it possible for those opposite to ever do that? Why was it, where we saw deficits increasing, debt increasing, even before the pandemic hit?
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hume, second supplementary. Oh, beg your pardon. I nearly gave you a free one. Trying to help. Senator Hodgkins-May.
Thank you, President. This is not my first speech. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister. This weekend I'll be door-knocking in my home area of St Kilda, and I'll hear from community members about the Albanese government's decision to prioritise budget surplus over helping them. I'll hear about your decision to have the budget pump almost $50 billion into subsidising fossil fuels over the next 10 years when we are veering towards environmental and climate collapse because you prioritise your corporate mates over the people who voted you in. Minister, what should I tell my community when they ask me about this government's betrayal of those doing it tough and selling our kids' futures to big coal and gas companies?
Thank you, Senator Hodgkins-May. Senator Ayres, I've called the minister to answer the question. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I think
Order. Order.
Thank you, President. I thank the senator and congratulate her on her first question and to her swearing in this place. If I may hasten to add, I suspect that there might. You are door knocking, but I suspect you're also putting a view in that door knocking, which was as expressed in the question. And what I would say to them is that this is the only party that is offering energy price relief.
That's right.
This is the only party which is offering rent assistance.
That's right.
The biggest increase, on the back of the biggest increase in many years, another increase. This is the only party that is actually offering a transition to the clean energy future that will be implemented. Because, with respect, Senator, your party thinks you can do it by press release.
Yes.
You can do it by press release and slogans. And the hard job of actually transitioning what has been a fossil fuel-dependent economy to a renewable energy economy is one we understand. And this budget invests in a future made in Australia. And you know what that is about? It is about grasping the opportunities of net zero. It is about recognising if we want both, to ensure jobs for our kids, and if we want also to deal with the crisis that we see in climate, then we have to transition our economy, and that means governments have to do what we are doing in this budget, which is giving the signal to the markets and investing to ensure we drive investment into green hydrogen, into renewable energy, into those industries which are necessary for the clean energy economy. So you can tell them this is a government focused on equity now, fairness now for Australians, but also a future which has more opportunity and which grasps the opportunities of a clean energy economy.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Order. Order. Order on my right. Senator Watt, I've just called your side of the chamber to order. Order. Senator McKenzie. Senator Hodgkins-May, first supplementary.
Members of my community saw the Albanese government release its future gas strategy and its push to sell coal and gas beyond 2050. They then witnessed the highly coordinated display of faux outrage from government MPs in marginal seats right across this country. These same MPs did not even bother to turn up to the other chamber yesterday to vote on this issue. What is your message to my community about why they failed to vote to oppose expanding coal and gas beyond 2050 and locking us into climate and biodiversity crises?
Thank you, Senator. Minister Wong.
I've previously suggested the Greens might be involved in a bit of electoral politics when it comes to some of these policies, and I think that was demonstrated by that question, where you actually asked about specific members of parliament exercising their vote or not exercising their vote. With all due respect, Senator, I don't actually watch all of the proceedings in the House of Representatives. I've got a few other things that I try to be working on, so I'll take as read what you've put to me, but can I make some general comments about gas? And I find it disappointing.
Order.
See, I'll take the interjection from the senator. I mean that what is problematic about this discussion, it becomes a discussion about emotion and identity and politics and not about facts. You know, that is what happens. And the fact that I'm just told, oh, you love it, is a demonstration. It's not about what you love or you don't love. It's about what is the best way to make the transition.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hodgkins-May, second supplementary.
When defending the future when defending the future gas strategy, the Prime Minister said not a cent would be spent on gas companies. So why does the budget include $33 million for Santos's sea dumping infrastructure on top of the $1.5 billion for the Middle Arm gas and petrochemical hub in Darwin? Is the Prime Minister mistaken about the fossil fuel subsidies in the budget?
Thank you, Senator Hodgkins. Minister.
Again, I think there's some factual issues with the question. I'll take, for example, Middle Arm, and I know there's been a campaign against Middle Arm from the Greens political party. The Australian government's investment isn't in Middle Arm Sustainable Development Precinct, is an investment to support industries critical to meeting our commitment to net zero, including green hydrogen, the manufacture and export of lithium batteries and renewable energy. The government's investment in Middle Arm is not an investment in gas or an investment in fracking. And those who continue to peddle this conspiracy are failing to engage in the detail of the proposition on Middle Arm that the Australian government has put to the Northern Territory government. So what I would say to you, we obviously we have a view that we want to transition what has been a very fossil fuel dependent economy to an economy that is a renewable energy superpower.
Thank you, Minister.
And we know
the time for
there is
answering
work
has
required
expired.
to do so.
Senator Hanson. I beg your pardon, Senator Grogan.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Minister Wong. Given that helping Australians with the cost of living is our government's #1 priority, can the Minister please inform the Senate how the Albanese Labor government's budget delivers for all Australians? And can the Minister please provide some details on one of my favourite measures, which is the cut for every taxpayer, and any other measures, key measures within that? And as well, could you please touch on the energy bill relief for every household, less student debt and an increase to rent assistance for nearly 1 million households?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Grogan from the fantastic state of South Australia, and thank you for having such a close interest in the budget measures. And of course, as the Treasurer and Finance Minister and Prime Minister have made clear, our first priority in this budget was to deal with cost of living pressures, and to do so in a way that didn't add to inflation, at the same time as charting a course for the future. But in relation to cost of living, because of course we understand the extent to which Australians are doing it tough, and it is so important for this government to do all we can in a responsible way to assist with the cost of living. It's our greatest. It's the big challenge, not just here, but in every household in Australia. So, how is our budget helping? Well, the first is tax cuts. Tax cuts for every Australian. Tax cuts for every Australian that are geared far more to those on middle incomes and lower incomes, and far less to high-income Australians than was proposed by those opposite. So these are tax cuts which deliver to 1.36 million taxpayers, 13.6 million taxpayers across the country. Then, of course, there is electricity relief, electricity bill relief for every household. For every household. We understand that energy prices mean that people are doing it tough, and we are in this budget, a centrepiece of the budget is a $300 rebate for every Australian household. Of Australia's 13.6 million taxpayers, everyone will get a tax cut. Average tax cut of $1,888. On top of that, as I said, a $300 electricity bill rebate and $325 for eligible small businesses. And this extends and expands the energy bill relief rolled out last year. And on top of that, of course, is 10% increase to Commonwealth rent assistance.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Thank you, and thank you, Minister. That was a great response. In my home state of South Australia, many of the people I speak to want affordable housing, and I'm sure that's the case across the country. Can the Minister please tell the Senate what the Albanese Labor government budget will do for people who want to buy a home and for people who are renting, and more broadly, what the government is doing to deliver more homes for more home buyers and renters?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. And I know from not only your priorities in the parliament, but also your work outside of the parliament before you were sworn in this place, that you understand deeply the importance of housing supply and of social and affordable housing. And unfortunately, as Senator Gallagher said, we have had 10 years of neglect from the other side. Actually, it was more than neglect, President. It was an active decision not to take any responsibility for housing supply. And now they come in here and have a go and say, oh, well, where's the housing supply, as if the last 10 years of vacating this policy area can be hidden. The budget includes $6.2 billion in new investment to build more homes quickly, bringing the government's new housing initiatives to $32 billion. $32 billion for more social and affordable housing, for more infrastructure and the removal of red tape.
Thank you, Minister.
And for better transport and increased student housing.
Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Could the Minister now please explain how the spending in this budget is responsible and carefully calibrated so that it can deliver responsible cost of living relief and ease pressures now without adding to inflation?
Minister Wong.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Well, the government's budget balances relief, restraint and renewal and is delivering a cost of living package that is both substantial and responsible, but which is forecast, which is in the context of a forecast second surplus and inflation returning to the band during the calendar year under the Treasury's estimates. But I would make this point. We've heard a lot from those opposite in this question time and in response to the budget about why we need more spending restraint. Why we need more spending restraint? Why too much is being spent? Well, tomorrow night is Mr Dutton's third budget reply. His third budget reply. So far, it has been all negativity and no plans. Well, that dance is going to have to come to an end. That is going to have to come to an end. At some point, you're going to have to front up and tell people what you're going to cut.
Minister Wong,
are you going to do it tomorrow night?
Minister Wong, thank you. The time has expired. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Wong. Considering Gaza has been effectively controlled by a genocidal terrorist group which invaded Israel and murdered more than 1,200 innocent people last year, how is Australia's support for Palestine's membership of the United Nations compatible with Article 2, Part 3 of the United Nations Charter that states all members shall settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered, and Part 4, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. So please explain.
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Hanson for the question, and I would make the point to her first that all of us unequivocally, well, certainly the government, unequivocally condemns the actions of Hamas. I have said publicly on many occasions Hamas is a terrorist group. Hamas is dedicated to the destruction of the State of Israel and to the destruction of the Jewish people. Hamas has no place in the future governance of a Palestinian state, and we have called consistently for Hamas to release hostages. The resolution that you are referencing was a resolution supported by some 143 countries, which was fundamentally about how the world was trying to overcome the cycle of violence in the Middle East and create momentum for a two-state solution. I want to make this very clear, Senator Hanson. Hamas does not support a two-state solution. Hamas supports the destruction of the State of Israel. That is clear. So a support for a two-state solution, and people might have different views about whether we should have, but it is wrong to say that voting for a resolution that supports a two-state solution is somehow supportive of Hamas. It is contrary to their views. And I believe, after having visited the Middle East and engaging both with Israelis and Arab leaders, that the only pathway to security for Israel, long-term security for the State of Israel, as well as for the Palestinian people, the only path ultimately to ending the cycle of violence which has dogged so much of our lives and has worsened post the atrocities of October 7th and the events since then, is to work towards that two-state solution. And that is the spirit in which we supported a resolution which extended more rights as an observer.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
Sorry, Minister, you didn't answer the question at all and you avoided it. If this so-called Palestinian state chooses a Hamas terrorist to represent it at the UN, will your government continue to support its membership?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
First, if I may, Senator Hanson, the resolution extended additional rights as an observer. Membership of the United Nations General Assembly can only be granted by the UN Security Council, and the resolution was negotiated through the week to reflect those provisions of the UN Charter, which is the power of the UN Security Council to grant membership. So what we did support was additional rights. In relation to the question about who represents the Palestinian mission, it is the Palestinian Authority at the United Nations.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
Okay, Minister, you never even touched on answering my question at all. We'll try for a third one. An editorial in the Australian newspaper 2 days ago reported Hamas has welcomed the resolution that your government supported in the UN last week. Would you please explain to the Australian people why your government has done the bidding of terrorists who have committed the greatest atrocity against Jewish people since the Holocaust?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Wong.
I don't agree with your assertions, Senator Hanson, and I don't propose to repeat them, but I don't agree with them. I've explained to you that a vote for two states is not a vote for Hamas. In fact, it is precisely the opposite of what Hamas wants. And I would make the point, that they have made clear their intent. What we have to do as an international community is to look at how we might bring momentum to security for both Israelis and Palestinians. That is what we are doing. And I appreciate you don't agree with it, Senator Hanson, but that is our motivation. And I think it is wrong to make the assertions that you're making about why we took that decision and why we voted as we did. And as I've said publicly, I would make the point that our special strategic partner, Japan, that the Republic of Korea, that New Zealand all took the same decision.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Cash.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister confirm that a multimillionaire with a main residence and 2 holiday houses will receive the $300 energy rebate announced in last night's budget for each of their properties for a total of $900? Why is the government prioritising energy rebates to those with multiple properties instead of Australian families who are doing it tough right now under Labor?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And it is interesting to hear that the line of questioning that I'm getting from the opposition seems to indicate that they're not going to support the energy bill relief that we've had in the budget, despite the Leader of the Opposition saying they would, and I think the Shadow Treasurer said they would, and now I'm getting the vibe that something's happened Senate side to say that they're not supporting it. Cost of living relief has been an important part of this budget, and it's been an important part of the previous 2 budgets. We have looked at ways to provide assistance to people, including those who aren't on existing concessions arrangements. The success of the energy bill relief last year showed that we could put downward pressure on inflation, and I would remind those opposite that inflation, when we came to government, had a 6 in front of it. It now has a 3 in front of it. And the forecast for Treasury have us reaching an inflation rate with a 2 in front of it through this year.
Please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
It is a point of order in relation to relevance, and with all due respect, the question was in relation to why are you giving $900 to millionaires and billionaires and not focusing on the people who are actually doing it tough under Labor?
Order. Order. The minister is being relevant, and I will continue to listen. Senator McKenzie, and on this side, I'm assuming it was Senator Watt. I'm asking you both to come. Order. 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 Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And some of our cost of living relief is broad-based and some of it is targeted. So our tax cuts are for every taxpayer. Our energy bill relief is for every household. Our focus has been on people who are doing it tough, particularly those on concessions, and that's why you see with medicines and rent assistance that particularly targets those households. But the most efficient and effective way to deliver energy bill relief above the concessions threshold for a short period of time over the next calendar year is to apply it to every household. Now, our focus is on those households that are on the concessions, fixed incomes, and those of Middle Australia. We make no secret of that. But the most efficient and effective way to deliver this program through the states and territories and through electricity retailers is to make the program broad-based, and every household will receive that assistance, and it recognises the cost of living pressures are up and down the income threshold.
Senator Cash, first supplementary.
And can the minister guarantee that the energy costs of Australians will actually be lower next year, and that the $300 rebate will not simply be used to offset another increase in energy prices, increases that are now the hallmark of the Albanese government?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. And I would remind Senator Cash that when they voted against energy bill relief in the last budget, electricity prices without that relief would have been 15%, and with the relief they were 2%. So I would just remind those opposite, when they voted against energy bill relief in the last budget, you voted for higher power prices. You are now indicating to me, through your line of questioning, that you don't support energy bill relief to every household in Australia, so that you therefore—
Order on my left, particularly Senator Cash and Senator McGrath, who I called. Minister, please continue.
Thank you. And we are providing short-term relief for those energy increases that we've seen. And, I mean, again, the amnesia that is taking hold over there. Just remember the energy crisis we inherited from you. The day we came to government, remember how you hid the price increases? You hid the price increases before the election. We provided energy bill relief. We will continue to do so as we transition to a net zero economy, which will continue to put downward pressure on energy prices.
Answering has expired. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
And will the minister finally concede that the Albanese government has broken its key election commitment, and that Australians have not saved and will not save $275 a year on energy, but are in fact paying much more under the Albanese government? We always said life wouldn't be easy under Mr Albanese, and guess what? That's right.
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I can confirm that energy prices are lower under this government without the assistance of the opposition. You voted against energy bill relief. Remember that, or have you forgotten that? You forgot that?
Minister,
you forgot the old hot—
Minister, order on my left. Order. Senator Cash, I've called order. That applies to you. I should not have to name you. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. We inherited an energy crisis. We had inflation running at 6%. We had deficits. We had debt as far as the eye could see. We have turned it around, and we are providing cost of living relief where it's affordable and responsible to do so, to take some of the pressure off those bill increases that we've seen. That's what a responsible government does. That's what a government does that puts people at the centre as opposed to the politics. And I will be looking forward to the Leader of the Opposition's budget in reply to see what he actually says about these energy bill rebates, because it seems to me there's a mixed view amongst his team about whether or not you're going to support them. And if you're not going to support them, you can go and explain why energy bills should be higher than they would otherwise be without this subsidy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher, and will reference Budget Paper 4 Agency Resourcing, page 186, Department Expenses table. The government has been conducting a program of reducing spending on external providers, contractors, consultants, and hiring employees directly instead to perform those duties, and One Nation supports that. These conversions from external providers to employees save taxpayers money, being the difference between paying a public servant to do that work and paying a consultant, partly balanced out by the increased cost of office expenses, travel and so on. Minister, how much has this program saved in 2023-24, and how much will it save over forward estimates, noting that I understand the budget papers have another 2,502 conversions projected?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me a question about budget paper 4. That is the budget paper that Finance has responsibility for, and we have worked hard to make conversions, as you say, and to reinvest and put in increased capability into the public service. What we did find out from the audit of employment was that the real size of the APS when we came to government was much larger than had been publicly reported. So we are taking steps to rebalance it and to put public servants into jobs that Labor Hire had done. In the last budget, I think the savings were in the order of $800 million in terms of the conversions that were being made. In this budget, we're finding a further $1 billion in reductions to agencies' departmental expenses because of the investments we're making in the public service. Obviously, we are making additional investments in the public service for additional responsibilities that they have. But what we're doing is painting a very honest picture of the price of delivering improved services. And those opposite, I know, are going to do what they always do and say they want a smaller public service, but they should then explain why veterans, 41,000 veterans who didn't have their claims allocated, now have their claims allocated and now are getting access to pensions, is a direct result of our investment in the Australian Federal Public Service. We weren't seeing those results, whether it be in immigration, DFAT, Services Australia or Veterans Affairs, and we see that on the payment side now because veterans are getting access, because they're being dealt with, because they've got public servants dealing with their claims, they are getting access to the money that they deserve. So it's a piece of ongoing work. Senator Roberts, if there's further information I can provide you, I will, but we are finding savings from the program at the same time that we're making additional investments.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, first supplementary.
Thank you. The table shows many departments costing less to run in 2027-28 than they do today, despite ongoing inflation in rents, electricity and expenses far exceeding the saving from operations. Department of Infrastructure down from $554 million this budget to $452 million in 27-28. Health and aged care, $1.6 billion down to $1.1 billion. Services Australia, $5.7 billion down to $4.5 billion. Minister, please explain from where these huge claimed projected savings will come.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
Okay, so we are, in terms of the savings that we've applied through this budget, it's an extra $1 billion onto the $3 billion that we had built into the budget, so that gives you a total of $4 billion. There are additional savings that come through the conversions of expensive labour hire into permanent public service work, and so that is part of it. I think it's probably a question we can go through at estimates as well, because I don't have that page in front of me. But there are savings, and we take that money from departments. They don't get that funding, so that is a saving that is realised at the time that that budget decision is taken.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Roberts, second supplementary.
Thank you. The $155 billion provided in the budget as departmental expenses in 2024-25 is projected to grow to $169 billion in 27-28. Almost entirely from increases in defence and NDIS. How could your forward projections show flat or reduced costs for, in effect, the entire government except NDIS and defence, when the budget puts inflation over that period at 13%? Does your budget dramatically understate projected deficits?
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Minister Gallagher.
No. The budget papers as they're released, and budget paper 1, which goes to providing the UCB, is based on all of the information that runs through all of the budget books. and that would include departmental expenses. There is extra investment going into defence and into NDIS, as you would expect. They are two of the 5 fastest-growing areas of the budget. The NDIS is the second. I think defence would be in the third, or third or fourth, and so they would be seeing increases. But the budget UCB takes into account all of those decisions. It may be reported slightly differently in different tables based on different accounting standards, but the UCB is an honest reflection of the state of the Commonwealth finances.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman.
President, my question is to Minister for Women and Minister for Finance, Minister Gallagher. Last night, the Treasurer delivered a budget that put women at the centre of the government's policies to deliver cost-of-living relief for all Australians to build a future made in Australia. As Minister for Women and Minister for Finance, you were central to the development of these policies. Can you please outline why the Albanese Labor government believes prioritising women is good policy, and explain how the government has supported women's economic security and assisted them in managing the cost of living?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you,
Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, President, and I thank Senator Payman for the question and for all the work she does supporting women, particularly women in WA and particularly young women, with all of her hard work that she does. We've made it clear that since day one, women's safety and women's economic equality and women's equality more generally was at the centre of this government's thinking and our decision-making. In relation to women's safety, there is additional investments towards funding the national plan, including the Leaving Violence payment and some smaller investments into looking at preventing violence. We're building on the 10 days paid domestic and family leave, and we're implementing all the recommendations of the Respect at Work. In relation to housing for safety, there's some important announcements in the budget for new investments directed to housing for women and children who are leaving domestic violence and for young people. And, of course, some of the national agreements that we've been making with the states in housing will have an impact there. Of course, our tax cuts will benefit every woman taxpayer, with 90% of women better off. And women, unsurprisingly, are the largest group in receiving Commonwealth rent assistance, and so they will benefit for those additional investments as well. We're also building on our effort to close the gender pay gap, and of course we've seen progress there. The gender pay gap is the smallest it's been on record, and we're really pleased with that. That, of course, comes with recognising the economic value and the investment made in aged care and some of those other care workforces where we know it's predominantly a female workforce. Importantly, we've got $1.1 billion going into super on PPL. While they are trying to undermine super constantly, we are trying to improve it and improve it for women, making sure that women retire with the gap that they don't retire with.
Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Clearly, those opposite are not interested in women's policies. Women's safety has been a key focus for the Albanese Labor government, and support for women's economic security is also critical for women's safety. Can the minister please outline how the Albanese Labor government has supported these issues since coming to government, as well as in the last night's budget?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Payman, and yes, it is a bit hard to hear at the moment, but I can say that we've put in place the Leaving Violence payment, which I referred to in my earlier answer. Also, importantly, some indexation, appropriate indexation of the National Legal Assistance Partnership as we consider, and the Family Violence Prevention Legal Services as we consider the review and the report that's been done. That's urgent funding because those roles were not indexed properly, surprise, surprise, under the former government in the Legal Assistance Partnership. Some extra money to establish a National Student Ombudsman to help eradicate gender-based violence from universities. Some funding to establish a National Higher Education Code to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. We've got some investments in providing policy advice to government to prevent gender-based violence, particularly as it relates to research in perpetration. And we've got targeted investments to support refugee and migrant women, First Nations family dispute resolution pilot.
Has expired. Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. As with every Albanese budget, last night's budget was accompanied by the Women's Budget Statement. Can the minister outline why the Women's Budget Statement is an important tool for policy making, and could you please highlight the key elements of the statement this year?
Thank you, Senator Payman. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Payman. And as we know, this is something that we have reintroduced, the Comprehensive Women's Budget Statement, to show and detail all of our policy decisions as they relate to women, but also, I think, gives those who are interested in women's policy all of the matters in the budget in one place. So, the Women's Budget Statements certainly provide a lot of detail about their safety, women's safety, and the work that's underway and the investments that are made, but also goes through the paid and unpaid economy, so looking at how we can pay for prac placements for nurses, teachers, social work students, extra investment for aged care workers. We've got our early childhood education and care workers who are looking to their decision from the Fair Work Commission relatively soon. We've made some changes to the carers payment. We're making some investments to young parents and dads to build up parenting skills. So this is a very comprehensive analysis of what's in the budget. We take women's policy seriously under this government.
Senator Davey.
Thank you very much. My question is for the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. After 3 budgets, Labor has added $315 billion of spending, adding fuel to the inflationary fire. Analysis by Deloitte says the result is a relatively large increase in government spending over the next 4 years, potentially putting further upward pressure on inflation. Ratings agencies Standard & Poor's have confirmed that results of this year's budget is almost no chance of an interest rate cut for struggling families this year. Will the minister admit that Australian families face higher interest rates for longer because of Labor's bad decisions and the wrong priorities?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister Gallagher.
Well, no, I completely reject that question that's been put. I would remind those opposite that inflation had a 6 in front of it when we came to government. It now has a 3 in front of it. It's been moderating. The highest quarter of inflation happened on your watch. The first interest rate increase happened on your watch. This is the budget and the economy that we inherit.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber, but particularly on my left. Minister Gallagher. Please continue.
Thank you. And again, Senator Davies uses the $300 billion figure. So you are not going to index the age pension then? You see that as wasteful spending. You're not going to make sure that veterans get their compensation. You see that as wasteful spending. You're not going to index other payments and income supports because you know how big they are in the budget. So you go out and you try and incorrectly accuse us of allocating new spending in that area when you know exactly what that means. So if Mr Dutton uses that figure tomorrow night, we know that you are not going to index aged pensions, and we will be making it clear to every aged pensioner that you see that. Well, be accountable for the figures you use, Senator Birmingham. If you're going to use that figure, that is clear that you do not support indexation of payments. Inflation is moderating. Real spending growth is half of what it was under you. We have lower debt. Our interest on our debt is lower. We've had a surplus and we are shooting for a second. All of that shows exactly how responsible we've been with the budget, how we've showed restraint, but how we've also been able to find room for priorities. I know you don't support them all, but priorities that we believe are the right decisions for people's cost of living pressures right now and to put down the foundations for future growth into the future.
Just a moment, Senator Davey. Senator McKenzie, I have constantly had to call you to order for the last hour. You are being incredibly disrespectful. I'm going to ask you for the remaining 2 questions to sit in silence. Senator Davey, first supplementary.
Alan Kohler has written in the New Daily that, and I quote, "The budget brought down on Tuesday is worth 2 more rate hikes," end quote. At the very least, interest rates will be higher for longer due to Labor spending. So, Minister, why are Australian families paying the price for the Albanese government's weak economic leadership?
Senator Green. Just to order on my right. Senator Chisholm. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. Well, the position that Mr Kohler puts and supported presumably by Senator Davies is not the advice to government, and you've seen that reflected in the budget papers, in the Treasury advice on the forecast for CPI, on what they expect. They make a forecast or assumption about what the cash rate will be. On all of the advice to government, that does not support the argument that Senator Davies is putting. We have been very restrained with our spending. We have been cleaning up the mess, dealing with terminating measures, paying down debt, delivering surpluses, restraining real spending growth, saying no to more things than we say yes to in this budget. And what we've tried to do is find a balance between short-term cost of living relief that doesn't add to inflation. In fact, it puts downward pressure on inflation, knocks off half a percentage point, and at the same time, looking forward as growth slows because of those interest rate increases and global challenges, how we drive future economic prosperity.
Has expired. Senator Davies, second supplementary.
So, under Labor's budget, to date, the typical Australian household with a mortgage is already more than $35,000 a year worse off. Now Mr Albanese wants to spend $13.7 billion on tax credits for billionaires at a time when ordinary Australians are struggling. So how much worse off will Australian households be if underlying inflation and interest rates stay higher for longer under Labor?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister Gallagher.
Well, what the government is doing is making sure that we're providing cost of living relief where we can, where it's affordable and responsible to do so. We've got wages moving again to provide support for incomes, household incomes, so that they get the appropriate wage increases that they were denied under 10 years of wage stagnation, and a deliberate design feature of the former government. In relation to the production tax credits, again, that you raised at the second half of your question, it's interesting but not surprising to see that the opposition, who say no to everything, are still in denial about the transition that's happening around us, the net zero transition that's happening globally. You still haven't reconciled that, and that you're now saying no to future economic prosperity for this country. That's what you're saying when you're dressing it up like that. We don't agree. It's obviously a fundamental difference. You want to vote against a future made in Australia. We want to support and build a future made in Australia.
Senator Polley.
My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. The Albanese Labor government's Future Made in Australia plan was a key part of last night's budget handed down by the Treasurer. I refer to comments made last night by the Treasurer where he said, and I quote, "Our $22.7 billion Future Made in Australia package will help make us an indispensable part of the global economy." Could the minister please outline a Future Made in Australia, what it will create in way of more trade opportunities, more jobs for Australians, and help ease the cost of living pressures for Australian households?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and can I thank Senator Polley for her questions. Her questions are always excellent questions, and I know she's very much interested in a future made in Australia, as is the Albanese government. And our plan is about maximising the industrial benefits for Australia as we move to net zero, while securing our place in the new global economy. Our government's $22.7 billion Future Made in Australia package is all about promoting growth of new export industries by leveraging our world-class resources and advantages in renewable energy. Because, President, the transition to a renewable economy
means more well-paid, secure jobs in the energy sector. It means Australian workers can power the nation while helping meeting our commitments to net zero. We will continue working with our trading partners to ensure that we remain an indispensable part of the global economy by building new clean energy industries and supply chains. In renewable hydrogen, green metals, batteries and critical minerals processing, just to name a few. We've committed $520 million to deepen trade in net zero industries through stronger engagement in our region to help us become a renewable energy superpower. And we'll launch new efforts to improve our competitiveness on the world stage by working with trade partners to support global rules on unfair trade practices and negotiate benchmarks to boost trade in our critical minerals. Because this government, the Albanese government, knows that a future made in Australia will create more trade opportunities with our partners, and more trade means more jobs and higher wages for Australian workers.
Senator Polley, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that informative answer. I apologise for those opposite who aren't obviously listening. But last night, the Treasurer also spoke about how the budget will help Australia seize the opportunities presented.
Keep going, Senator Polley.
Last night, the Treasurer also spoke about how the budget will help Australia seize the opportunities presented by the transition to net zero. Could you, Minister, outline how the government's Future Made in Australia plan will attract more productivity, foreign investment in Australia?
Thank you, Senator Polley. The time for answering has expired. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And yes, I can answer that question, Senator Polley. The government welcomes foreign investment, especially in renewable energy. Our Future Made in Australia plan involves creating a new front door for foreign investors with major transformational investment proposals, making it even easier to invest here in Australia. We're also delivering important changes to streamline and strengthen Australia's foreign investment framework. These changes deliver a stronger, faster and more transparent approach to foreign investment, helping attract the game-changing projects, jobs and capabilities that we need to build a future made in Australia. Attracting investment is also an important part of our ambition to become a renewable energy superpower. More investment in renewable projects means more national income and more well-paying local jobs for Australian workers.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister also explain to the Senate how the Future Made in Australia package will help Australia move up global supply chains to contribute to creating more value-added, diverse, resilient and sustainable industries here in Australia, and particularly in my home state of Tasmania?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And yes, I can, Senator Polley, because the Future Made in Australia package will help build a stronger, more diversified and more resilient Australian economy powered by clean energy. The package will give our country and workers a leg up in industries where we have a comparative advantage, while also supporting our goals of decarbonisation and supply chain resilience. For example, the new critical minerals tax production credit will move us up the global value chain while incentivising more investment in critical imports to solar panels, batteries and high-tech manufacturing. Peter Dutton, on the other hand, thinks there's no... he thinks... Peter Dutton thinks there's no point...
Minister Farrell, please refer to those in the other place by their correct titles.
The Leader of the Opposition... The Leader of the Opposition thinks there's no point investing in a future made in Australia.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. The Leader gets preference. The Leader gets preference, Senator McKenzie.
I like to keep people, engaged. Unexpectedness is a good thing. I ask for the questions we placed on notice. No. Actually, I did think about it.